Welcome back. I'm now joined by our resident NASCAR expert, Steven Taranto, as we get ready to wave some flags at some drivers and look at the season that was. So, Steven, we're going to start out waving a yellow flag for a guy that didn't live up to expectations this year. Who was it?
I think the easy pick here is Brad Keselowski. I mean, obviously he was coming off of his first Sprint Cup championship. Expectations for him were very high, and he was living up to those at the beginning of the season. He dueled with Jimmie Johnson for the Daytona 500, and his results were right where they were at the end of last year's chase. And then the infractions at Texas came, and there were a lot of questions within the Penske camp. Ford was down on horsepower for a while. The model was aerodynamically inferior for a bit compared to the Chevy and Toyota products. So Keselowski faltered in the middle of the season, and when it came time to make the chase, he was behind. He made a run to the chase, but ultimately some mechanical demons and some bad racing luck ultimately kept him from being there. He only won a race at Charlotte late in the season, so ultimately it was a very disappointing season for Keselowski in the Penske camp.
Yeah, well, certainly not what Brad Keselowski was looking for after that championship season last year.
Oh, yeah.
Let's wave a red flag at somebody who faltered down the stretch. Who would that be for you?
That would be Clint Bowyer, another driver who did very well during the 2012 season, finishing second in points. I mean, he did not miss a beat from where he was last season for the first 26 races of this season. He was right there, always a contender. Didn't break the win column, but ultimately he was always right there. And then the Richmond race happened, and the big fallout from that with the record penalties and the questions about whether or not MWR sponsors were going to leave. After that, only Napa ended up doing so. And that weighed on Bowyer and his whole race team, and you could tell during the chase because Bowyer is one of the most energetic drivers in the garage area, but he was very quiet both in terms of media-wise and performance-wise during the chase. He didn't completely implode. He finished 7th in points, but ultimately he just went out of a whimper ultimately. I think that a lot of people were disappointed considering the way that he had run prior to the whole Spingate incident.
Yeah, well, certainly a disappointing end to the season for Clint Bowyer. Somebody who didn't have a disappointing end of the season, I'm sure you're going to surprise a lot of people with this answer.
Oh, yes.
But who gets your checkered flag for the best driver of the entire season?
Jimmie Johnson, easily. This 6th championship is his latest and greatest accomplishment. This was by far one of his best seasons. You know, winning Daytona, winning the All-Star race, actually sweeping the season at Daytona, which hasn't been done in quite a while. I can normally cite these statistics. I cannot remember the last time someone swept this season at Daytona. Now, all of a sudden, Johnson is entered the greatest of all time discussion. He's back on top after having not been champion the past 2 seasons. So, I mean, he won, I think, 6 races this season. He could have won a lot more. This was probably the most dominant I have ever seen Johnson. I mean, once it came down to chase time, he was just ice cold. No one else could touch him.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Johnson, definitely in the conversation for greatest of all time. He's got a couple races, got a couple championships to go before he is actually the greatest of all time. There you have it, folks. We're going to step away one last time. Coming up, we introduce the Magic 8 Ball segment to the show. This is going to be fun.